Şu belgeseli izleyelim. Hoş bulduk Stockholm'a. Ark Raiders'ın.
Stockholm is the home of Embark Studios, the creators of Ark Raiders, and for the past few years I've been documenting the development of this game. But while most games change over the course of development, the story of Ark Raiders is a unique one.
Yeah.
Because not only has this game changed dramatically, but the original version of the game that was shown to the public no longer exists. And ever since it was first shown, the internet has been asking one question. What exactly happened to that version of the game? When the Ark Raider teaser trailer was first shown to the world at the Game Awards in 2021,
Oğlum bu arada
it was a
çok
very
enteresan.
different game.
Ben bunun sızıntıları da vardı bu oyunun. Şey versiyonu, PvE versiyonunun. Şey çok iyi ya. Bir firmanın yarak gibi olmuş cümlesini anlayıp evet abi gerçekten öyle olmuş deyip değiştirmesi müthiş bir başarı.
You see, back then it was being pitched as a co-op PvE experience with players able to jump high and run across a wide open map, working together to defeat massive machines with emergent behaviors. Players selected their characters from a set of defined heroes, and crucially, it was a free-to-play game. Over the next 4 years, Ark Raiders would evolve into something very different. A PvP-VE extraction game with denser, more lived-in levels. Machines of all shapes and sizes would populate this world. The enemies were driven by physics and groundbreaking locomotion tech, turning a once arcadey experience into something far more grounded.
Bu arada oyunun bir şeyi bence övülmüyor. Canavarların, arkların, özellikle örümcek gibi olan, bacakları uzun olan yaratıkların yürümesi inanılmaz başarılı. Yok AI değil. Oğlum hiçbir yere takılmıyorlar lan. Normalde sıçması lazım diye düşünüyorsun. Çünkü bu tür oyunlarda bu tür yaratıklar %100 ayağını bir yere falan takar takılır. Burada bir canavarın takılması neredeyse mümkün değil. Takılıyorlar bu arada bazen ama yani en azından 300 run atmışımdır. 300 run'da 2 kere falan gördüm.
In this three-part series, we're going to reveal not only why the original concept was killed, but how the current version of Ark Raiders rose from the ashes of that project. We're going to detail the bleeding-edge locomotion technology powering the movement of their most intimidating
takılan da şey oluyor, Leaper oluyor mesela. Queen veya Matriarch takılmıyor.
machines, how elements like gunplay and loot evolved over the years, why they dropped free to play, the impressive work done by the audio team, and much more. First things first, though, to fully understand what happened to Ark Raiders, the game that was meant to kickstart this new studio, we have to go back to the founding of Embark itself.
How did this new studio come about, and most importantly, how did they decide what type of games they wanted to make?
Bu adam çok iyi belgesel çekiyor ya bu arada.
Like a lot of the initial employees of Embark and the founders came from
Kaç
DICE.
dakika? 30 dakika.
I've been in the industry for close to 20 years.
hatta.
Most of that spent with the people here. I shipped 21 games on that year, I think.
Listeye bak. Listeye bak. Banger üstüne banger. Battlefield Heroes Kral neyle başlamış? 1943 Bad Company 2, Just Cause 2, Medal of Honor, Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, Hardline, Battlefield 1, Battlefront, Battlefield 5. Daha ne yani?
During my 20 years of building games or more, you know, the first game we built, we were 7 people in an apartment basically, you know, to then over.
Bu arada Embark'ın hep söyle. Yani Embark DICE'ın asıl ekibi bu arada.
Productions with over 1,000 people. Are the games themselves better? There are more of them. They're at higher fidelity, but are they actually better games? How do we move away from productions that are so large that they're difficult to manage?
I mean, I was part of the group, the founders group, so I was here when we were 6 people. Technology-wise, I mean, we quickly settled on Unreal, and then in conjunction with that, we also had proprietary tech that we were developing, and then also, of course, invested heavily on.
Bu arada araç da gösteriyorlar. Bazı maplerde araç olabilir.
Procedural tools, especially for the
Ama
content.
belki sadece
The initial
PvE versiyonunda da
gang sat
olabilir.
around a big table and discussed things that we want to explore. and games that we want to try and see if this fits into something that we want to do. So we started this endeavor of making micro pitches. That we would come up with a simple game concept and talk about it for just a couple of minutes. And we started doing this over and over, we started seeing common thematics. They slowly
Yok,
formed
sadece
into the
PvE gelmez
initial
oyuna.
pitch for what we wanted to make. So we pitched it to ourselves. A couple of these explorations were left by the wayside. One of them became the finals.
Belki ne gelir biliyor musun? Belki diyorum. Bir tane boss fight map'i gelebilir. Arada açılabilecek. Belki o gelir. Hani böyle, çünkü sol altta bir tane yanardağ gibi bir yer var. Map'te. Event olarak hani herkesin girebileceği, birbirine sıkamadığı boss raid. Aynen, boss raid'i. Evet,
A couple
event.
of thematics that we knew we were excited about was of course
Emperor,
the
evet,
prospect of
Emperor
space
kesmece.
travel, the impending sort of ecological collapse, the rise of AI and the man versus machine angle. That was a game in there, and I think when we were the first initial group sort of vetting different concepts, I think those were the things that were sticky in there. I think from a mechanics perspective, I think the first pitch was something along the lines of session-based raids. To give you an idea, we talked about some sort of Venn diagram between Shadow of the Colossus, Left 4 Dead, and PUBG. Somewhere in the middle there was a game concept that, I mean, on paper, was a super compelling concept to us, especially the making you a small human in a vast world with huge machines. That's what we started to explore, not knowing at all what kind of game loop we were supposed to have, but just like looking at the prospects of different mechanics in that context.
So we wanted to make something completely our own. And everyone had an idea of something fantastical. Sci-fi leaning because it's comfortable. Everyone kind of likes it, but it's also a challenge to carve out your own.
Ya motor kısmına
niche
çok
to
emin
that.
değilim.
And it was certainly challenging. Even my kid, who was like 11 or 12 at the time, just had the sentiment going, oh, new studio, sci-fi game, very original.
Çocuğa bak, taşak geçmiş.
Embark's first game was going to define the studio, and they
evet,
wanted
hiç
to work
farkı
on
yok.
something that was outside of their familiar first-person military backgrounds, a game that was on the bleeding edge of technological innovation. The team entered a long period of brainstorming and ideation as the studio slowly built up around them, a process that gave them many of their most attractive ideas, but also created significant design cul-de-sacs that would prove troublesome down the road. This project was known internally as Pioneer.
We developed, I think,
Tabii
core
ilk Ark'a başladılar. Yani ilk yaptıkları oyun Ark Raiders'dı. Ama Ark Raiders'ın development'ının gelişmesinin çok uzun süreceğini bildikleri için Ark Raiders'ı yaparken arada Finals'ı çıkardılar ki para kazandırsın kendilerine.
mechanics at the same time as we were testing out some initial ideas about the game mode itself. No one was thinking about a larger meta game at that time. Like, what is the actual economy that drives the players' motivations and so on. We were literally exploring the initial mechanics of how does it feel to play against these machines, and because I think all games needs to go through that. Like, is there something fun in the second-to-second mechanics? Like, is it fun to even in FIFA? If it's not fun to kick a ball against the wall, it's not going to be a fun football game. Sort of put these large machines in this large world, and I mean, we're again testing out playing against these large machines just from a pure
Kafasına direkt Stormtrooper'a.
sort of game and spectacle. There was something there.
You can say it was a extremely ambitious project. It's supposed to be a new genre, or was supposed to be a new genre, and session-based raid with, say, 40 players. And you're supposed to take down huge obstacles together, like big bosses, big AI enemies that evolve over time. So every time you go into a
Bu arada
session,
yeni genre dedikleri de Helldivers ha.
you play against a new version of the AI.
3 to 4 teams or more, I don't remember, but scattered out in a big world. And at some point, giant machines would arrive. Like, it was already populated with smaller machines, but then we would have these larger machines arrive, and then we would sort of have the surviving players would then converge into these epic moments at the end tail of a session we had some amazing playtests and amazing moments when we did that, and we saw the potential there. Like, and
Of, çok güzel mapmiş. Şeyi hatırlatıyor. Battlefront 2'deki map'i.
we wanted to believe that we could replicate that on a consistent basis. But that's where I think where the sober eye should have come perhaps a little
Evet,
bit
evet,
earlier.
barajın
That
sulu kısmı
we
burası.
wanted to believe that we had something there, that there are some incredible moments in there. But the individual player there, if we were being honest with ourselves and looking at the game with a lens of trying to capitalize on that and make a game out of that. Again, consistency.
Bu arada bak, şöyle görsel olarak bakıyorsun 2021'de aslında oyun bayağı bir vertical slice'ı, çok kaliteli bir vertical slice'ı varmış heriflerin. Düşünün bak 2021'de.
Consistently replicating a player session that would hold those moments over and over again. I think that was much harder than we thought.
Abi ama işte bak çok güzel bir şey. 2020'deki şu anda bile oynarım. Bir kere oynarsın ama adamın dediği de haklı. Tekrar oynanabilirliği çok az onun. Şimdi biz Ark Raiders'ın PvP, PvE olduğu için PvE dışında ya ben mesela Queen'i 10. kere kesmem. Queen'i keserken ölme riskim olduğu için heyecanlı oyun. Queen'e değil. PvP'ye ölme. Çünkü Queen'e ölmüyorsun ya. Elinde sonunda hani oyunda o canavarı da kesebilmek zorunda olduğun için o kadar zor yapamıyorlar. O kadar zor yapamadığın için bir yerden sonra şey limitine vuruyorsun. Yani keyif limitine vuruyorsun.
Version of the game, now known as Pio 1, was a very different game to the Ark Raiders we know today. Player movement was far more bombastic. Characters were powerful, adopted the personas of various heroes, and worked
Hiçbir şeyin Queen ölme olsun yok. Evet, katılıyorum bu arada, harbiden yok.
collaboratively to hunt down these large machines. Very different to Ark Raiders in terms of both gameplay and tone. But many fundamental aspects of the game were developed in this period. Highly detailed, vast open terrain, the feel of the weapons, the look of the world. One such aspect, the technology driving the locomotion of these large robots, is going to require its very own video in this series. So look out for
Çok
that
iyi
soon.
ya. Bu yaratık müthiş. Bu acaba çıkışta olacak mı? Yani şeyde olacak mı? Çünkü bu matriarka çok benziyor yapı olarak. Uzun yapısı filan ama bu daha da uzun ve tepesinde paratoner gibi bir şey var yani elektrik şeyi.
What's exciting and what's still exciting is the
Sıktı
fact
da hulu kıra kıra.
that using this technology for our locomotion system is the door that opens up when you are training something to behave
Matriarkın
and
gözüne
walk
çok benziyor
by
da tam değil
itself.
işte.
And the nature, like when this player starts interacting with that and losing limbs and still it wants to stand up, it just opens that door to a new type of experience that players haven't had before, I think. They're literally playing against a machine.
Ve evet şey de çok iyi. AI da çok iyi. Mesela Rocketeer'a insanlar snap hook'la üzerine çıkabiliyorlar. Rocketeer üzerinden o kişiyi atmaya çalışıyor. Baktı 30 saniye 45 saniye atamıyor, takla atıyor. İnanılmaz güzel yazmışlar AI'yi.
And the majority of our first year is building tools. I also knew that we weren't going to get things right. That we were going to make a ton of mistakes along the way, and we had to plan for those mistakes and kind of get ourselves in a cushion to be able to make those mistakes. Guess what? You know, if you're trying to send people to Mars, you will crash a bunch of rockets. We crashed a bunch of rockets.
I remember one of the earliest things that I worked
Unreal
on
Engine
was
5 bu.
the dog. Do you remember like the
Bu da şeyi kanıtlıyor. Ben yıllardır söylüyorum size. Unreal Engine 5 kötü motor değil. Yapımcılar tamamen üşengeç. Düzgün bir yapımcının elinde Unreal Engine 5 müthiş bir motor. Sadece optimizasyon için zaman ayırmaları lazım. Ekstra zamanlara ihtiyaçları var.
four-legged little pouncing thing that ran around the world? Yeah,
that's long gone.
Yeah, it's long gone. But that was one of the first things that I started working on.
sometimes ideas written down on paper or that people talk about, like, oh, it'll be so cool, we'll have these enormous things and they can come down and you can fight them, and then in practice when you put them into
kişiler
the game
bilmiyoruz.
and you kind of go, okay, well, how does
Bak,
it
o kadar
actually
300 kişi
work?
değil galiba.
It sounded really cool when we were talking about it, but actually now I'm just running around looking up all the time because it's 200 meters tall, and how do we even get up there, and what happens if I fall off?
I think one of the core problems was
İkisini de
that what
kaçırdım
we were
orayı.
building then was something
Ki o 300'ün bir
pretty
bölümünde
new
finals
in
yapıyor. Hatta
terms of
2
like
tane daha
how the
yeni oyun
gameplay
yapıyor.
would be, and
300'ün 300'de
it
arkta
felt like we
çalışmıyor.
were moving in the same direction.
2 yeni oyun
but
yapıyorlar
then
şu anda.
with the pandemic, we started to drift apart quite
Gördük
a
de ya
lot.
izledik.
way we built the game before was very loose. That kind of mixing pot produces a lot of cool moments, and we just couldn't find the nugget that makes you want to persist. What is the main retention mechanic behind some of all this? What's in the mixing pot of fun experiences?
I remember they had this like sort of crazy idea about projectiles that would remove the parts of the enemies. So that was one of the first things I actually worked on was
Roketire bak.
a function
Göt yine
for the
uçuyor.
launchers that we had to be able to like suck off the plates on one of the kind of bigger
güzelmiş.
scarab bots that we had.
Finding the fun is always the thing that you cannot just automatically say that we'll just do this and it will be fun. What you know is like you work and you put the thing in and it's not working as you want it to. So then you need to start reworking it and reiterating on it and maybe rethinking some of your initial assumptions that there's limitations in certain aspects and there's other ways that actually it's more fun because you play the game and you realize, you know what, it's more fun throwing these rocks at this robot, or it's more fun, you know, jumping, and that I think comes from playing the game,
Ama o
just
yapım
playing
böyle.
around with what you create.
İlk önce güzel gözükmesine gerek yok.
Express itself in the game's creation.
Eğlenceli mi değil mi?
You can actually do new meaningful things.
The way we developed our game by, you know, people put things in there and we feel it out together and we change what's
şöyle
wrong.
prototip için map muazzam
together
mesela.
worked well when we were a smaller
Demişlerin
team
futbolunu neydi ya?
and met each other all the
11
time.
bilmem
But
ne.
then it just didn't work
Yine
well
Zuma
once
11.
we were separated through the pandemic.
Behind the scenes, Pioneer was struggling to find its identity. The pandemic was partly to blame. Problem solving is much more challenging with teams spread apart. But more worryingly, the various departments were beginning to drift with each milestone. Communication was challenging remotely, and as a result, the game was beginning to feel less cohesive. More worryingly, the moments that made the game feel special, when all the players got together in the center of the map to destroy a large machine, were difficult to replicate. So in order to fix this, the team entered a 6-month phase in which they would try and distill this PvE experience into something that would deliver satisfying rounds more consistently.
Ne yaptılar?
This
PvP
phase was
eklediler.
known internally as the pivot.
If I remember correctly, we had actually reduced the game to a point where I said, okay, we need to make this one part fun. And if we can make this part fun, then we can replicate it, right? Even though we had this huge world, we were just using a small portion of it. And my first task was the moment I realized we are very ambitious, which was, Kaio, can you put a timeline to deliver this game, right, in 2020? And I said, well, from what I can see here, did all the estimates, talk to the whole team, understand the whole scope of it. I was like, okay, I think the best we can do is like we need around 2 years. And the answer was, no way. We have 6 months. How can we make a plan that fits 6 months? And I remember even the name of the presentation was called Hail Mary Plan. And we had a plan for trying to get something out there in 6 months.
At that time, it was in a state where we were looking
Ya
at
şey de
trying
çok
to
zor
launch
olmalı. Ulan
it,
kameranın önüne
or at
geçmez.
least getting ready to launch it.
Şey çok zor bir şey oğlum. Düşünsene yani oyun yapıyorsun. Bir şey geliştiriyorsun. Ve oyunun kötü olduğunu fark ediyorsun. Eidos kötü de değil. Daha da kötüsü. Eğlenceli değil. Bak kötü oyunu toparlayabilirsin. Eğlenceli değil. Oyun. Korkunç bir gerçeklik ya. Nasıl eğlenceli? Çünkü eğlenceli olmaması şu yüzden korkunç bir şey. Yani bir şey yaparken eğlenceli olmayacak bir şey yapmazsın. Farkında değilsindir.
So we'd had what we had called closed beta at that point, and I think as part of that process, realized that what we had there wasn't really a viable thing. Their game loop, it wasn't really there. So you'd have some sessions where you had an amazing moment, and you loved it, and you never had anything like that in a game ever before. And then the following 10 sessions, you were running for 10 kilometers with nothing happening and nothing to interact with. So it really kind of hinged on these highly emotional moments that were few and far between.
It's not like every player who goes into the game is going to be like, oh yeah, I ran into this giant boss and I had this cool encounter, because that's how we designed the encounter to play out. It's like some people ran in there and like, I just got stomped on the head and died immediately.
Yep.
It's like, oh, sorry, yeah, we don't actually control where it's putting its
Exactly.
legs.
Or I ran in and someone had already pulled 3 legs off of it. So
Yeah.
now it was laying there and kind of like trying to, you know, kind of go at you.
Felt kind of cruel.
Yeah, exactly. And it was really difficult to make it consistent for all the players.
This whole idea about kind of raiding together against this huge
Evet,
large
bir de
robot.
o da var. Şimdi yani hala extraction kısım oyun hani PvE iken şey de kötü. Şimdi mesela birisi mid'e daha yakın olacak. Mid'de boss fight varsa adam boss fight'ı neredeyse bitirmiş. Şimdi ben PvP de yapamıyorsam, şimdi mesela biz geç girdiğimizde 17. dakikada girdiğimizde 20. dakikada girdiğimizde şey dert değil. Gidiyoruz. Lan herif Matriarch Queen'i öldürüyor. Ben o herifi öldürürüm o zaman. Anladın mı? Orada bir keyifli oluyor.
There was elements of fun in there.
Ha,
for sure,
PvP
and there was
iyi
elements of
eklemeleri
spectacle
yaptıkları en
in
doğru
all of
karar.
it, for sure. But what I couldn't see was not that there wasn't moments of fun, or that. What I couldn't see is that I couldn't see the big picture of it. I didn't quite understand how all of this would meaningfully add up to something that could stand the test of time and consistently do so. We had at the end of the pivot period, there was a playtest, or there was a playtest where we invited friends and family.
A mode where you broke into the spaceport level and activated these things, which culminated in one of our giant bosses coming down. We went out with that in the closed beta, and you know, it did what it needed to do, but it also affirmed that outside of those emotional highs and the novel gameplay, there was nothing that stitched it together. We lacked any sense of metagame or progression. So you'd have these fun sessions for a few times, but there was nothing that actually pulled you back or kept you going forward.
You know, I think a couple of us already knew.
Tam ne
what that
olmuş biliyor musun? Helldivers ama stresli değil. Yaptıkları Helldivers bu arada. Bu yani şu anda anlattıklarının PvE versiyonu. Dümdüz Helldivers yapmışlar ama sıkıntı şu, Helldivers'da mesela küçük yaratıklar da sana çok sıkıntı yaratıyor. Yok, Helldivers sıkıcı değil işte. Çünkü Helldivers o şeyi mükemmel yapabiliyor. Çünkü Helldivers'da küçük şeyleri sen küçümsemiyorsun. Çünkü o kadar fazla sayıda geliyor ki stres yaratıyor sana. Onu da düzgün düşünmen lazım. Bu oyunda onu yapmamışlar. Küçükler çünkü drone olduğu için, uçtuğu için hani yerdeki şey yaratığı gibi olmuyor.
But at the end of the day, it became even clearer as we got closer to the deadline that
bu herifler sadece şey yapmış. Boss fight. Hani boss fight eğlenceli, diğerleri meh.
So Patrick already said, I think the first day I started here is that I think you need to add PvP.
We had conversations, and I certainly, as I'm always, was very opinionated towards the team around what I thought. I mean, from the start, I said, listen, I think that we need this to be a PvP game to some extent. I think we're going to struggle with getting a PvE game the way that we want to with the tech that we have.
And that's really when we had a lot of internal discussions, and I think we had our summer party and then went on break and came back, and then everyone was informed that we were pivoting to a new genre and starting to explore what that could mean, and lifted everything we could. So a lot of the environments, the enemies, the characters or things about the characters were lifted and sort of repurposed.
It didn't work. The larger recipe for the game wasn't there, and again, we couldn't replicate the sessions consistently enough. So I think that's enough to start talking about, well, should we consider adding the PvP component?
I understand that a lot of people...
Bu arada ama şeyi de görüyorsun bak, 2020'de adamlar veya 21'de prototip hazır, oyunun bazı mekanikleri hazır, PvE hazır. Oyunu hani dünyası hazır ya, bazı mapleri gördünüz ya direkt. Dünya 2 tane map, 3 tane map hazır direkt. Ve ona rağmen oyun 2025'in sonunda çıktı. Düşünün. Hani o kadar fazla oyun yapımı çok zor bir şey abi.
Me included, wanted this to be a PvE game, and I wanted for our vision to work. But when it doesn't work, you have two options. You can either, well, three. You can release what you have to the public, and they will crucify you. We've seen that happen multiple times. Or you decide, I don't want to continue with this, we shut it down.
Ama arada
That we've seen that multiple
bunu
times.
yapıyorlardı ama.
Or you still have a belief in the lore, everything that you've built, and the core kind of gameplay loop, and you say, maybe I can just make this something different.
The pivot had
Bu da
not
Blue
worked.
Map'i.
The team knew that a more drastic solution was required, a new phase in which the older version of Arc Raiders would be put to rest and a new game built around PvE and PvP combat would be built. This phase, the most significant beat of Arc Raiders' development story, is known internally as the Reset. But to buy the studio enough time to reset Arc Raiders, they'd first have to push forward the release of the studio's other multiplayer project.
What the studio needed to do once we actually made the decision was that one of the reasons we could make it was we switched the order of the games. So that would be the implication of it, because we wouldn't be able to add PvP and figure out what the new game was all about and still keep the...
Bu arada bu da çok büyük bir risk çünkü Finals'da o kadar tutmadı. Çok iyi bir oyun. Sıkıntı şu. Finals'daki bazı kötü kararları yüzünden ben hala rank sisteminde kötü olduğunu düşünüyorum. Çok uzun süreye çok az şeyler verdiklerini düşünüyorum da. Yani Finals tam bare minimum tuttu.
Kind of targeted.
Yani firma gidebilirdi.
That was pretty clear from the beginning.
Evet, eskiden
Which meant that
çalışalım.
we had to put the finals front and center. Which
Ya
of course for
balans
them
filan
was...
ayrı abi. Balans ayrı da şey sıkıcıydı Finals'da. Şimdi bu tür kompetitif oyunlarda rank sistemi iyi olması lazım. Çünkü senin asıl oynadığın şey rank oluyor. Bu oyunun rankı o kadar kötüydü ki 1,5 saat harcayıp neredeyse hiçbir şey kazanmıyordun rank olarak. Hani zamanını boşa atıyordun resmen. Hani bir ödülü yoktu rankın. En büyük problemi oydu. Yani Overwatch'un rankı kötüdür. Bu daha da kötüydü Overwatch'un rankından.
Perhaps, okay, suddenly we're in the hot seat now, and that certainly must have felt like a challenge to that team.
The reset wasn't just going to be a case of sticking PvE into their PvP game. It was going to require a fundamentally new approach to the way sessions would play out. A way of merging the best parts of their enemies and world building with PvP gameplay that felt exciting, but not overly punishing either. So, what was going to get cut, and what did they keep?
So we had the world, which we knew we liked. We knew the world that was crafted, and I think one of the reasons why I was playing the game quite early, I was just walking through these empty hallways and these offices, and I was thinking to myself, like, I just want to explore this place. I want this to be more than just a static backdrop where, you know, I'm fighting robots. I want this to be something. I want to be here because you already built one half of it. So I feel like you already made me want to go and explore this
Rocketeer'in ismi.
So what game type then would be the game that kind of fits there?
Light
How can we
Drone
kind of apply that to
diğeri.
a new game type?
Wasp yok yine
When we
Wasp'miş.
broke it all down, it started to become more and more apparent on, you know, we had the
Ya bu oyunun bu arada
so we wanted to continue building, we wanted to keep the large robot.
Queen'e bak. Diğer başarılarından birisi de AAA oyunu animasyonları var bu oyunun. Hani Last of Us kalitesinde animasyonları var. Bir multiplayer oyunu için çok zor bir şey bu.
But we wanted to keep the world, we wanted to keep the brand and IP because we saw the response from the players and all those things. So we didn't feel like we needed to reinvent all those things. There was a game telling us that that's what it wanted to be to some degree.
If we think about the different phases, the phase we were in when we did the reset felt absolutely right because the game we had at our hands at that point wasn't.
Bu arada ne kadar bufflamışlar roketi. 3 roket yedi ölmedi.
There was one thing that they kept bringing back to me. Like, you know, when was the game most fun? And they said like M12, I think is the name, M12. You need to go back and look at M12. I was like, okay, milestone 12. I have to go back and look at it, which was a scaled down version of the full experience, but it took place around the spaceport area and there was players going through a bunch of arcs and then eventually ended up inside of the spaceport and then fought one of the large robots inside the spaceport. And so they felt like that was the strongest that the game had been. So we tried to recreate that to some degree, as at least take some of the things that we knew worked.
Şey de çok enteresan. Loot sistemi.
I think what worked was
Vampire Survivors gibi yanında koşunca şey yapıyor.
of how players were.
Buralara sadece ekranda göstermek şey için, debug için ya. Bu oyunda zaten öyle olmayacak da. Oyun yaparken o sayıların gözükmesi, bazı şeyleri kasti açıyorsun oyun yaparken. Hani görsel şey gibi. Debug tool'u o.
Interacting with each other and the machines, and there was a good sort of rhythm of play in that one. I think the destruction of the machines themselves, there were some sort of
Eski arayüz de kötü değilmiş bu arada.
gratifying, juicy destruction, and we could see how the machines were navigating across this spaceport.
Gördüm bir sene konuştuk.
Repeating it, if you're asking yourselves, would I do this over and over again? Even if you just change the environments and the machines were slightly different and so on, like what is the... Then you start asking the right questions about why would I come back? And in a context of a free-to-play game where retention is crucial, you have to be able to see yourself
Yaratan ismi de
doing
trollmüş
that
bu
over
arada.
and over again.
The game we're making now was the game I sort of imagined when we started building it. It was a game about exploring and being in this world.
Görsel downgrade yemiş. Hayır canım, downgrade yemiş. Upgrade yemiş oğlum. Siz düşük grafikte oynuyorsunuz herhalde.
Go places to find things. And just the way the game was playing earlier was this action game where things just came at you. To me, it's much better because it has a slower pace. This is the best game I've worked on for me because it's a game about listening for things.
And that's why...
Kardeşim senin hakkını yediler. Sen görsel ses dizaynı olarak dünyanın en iyi işini yaptın. Senin hakkını yediler. Game Awards'da size oy verilmeyen herkesin elleri kırılsın.
PvP is such an important addition to the game. Like, I think a lot of people have a strong reaction to what that might mean. But if you think about what happens when you play against other humans, you just realize that finite distance gets closer to infinite because now you have all the permutations of human behavior in the session. Some players might not like playing another person because you'll get tryhards that are very, very good.
Diyemem, direkt yok,
But if you do
adaylığı
a job
yok.
well, then you
Yani
have something that feels balanced and fun, even if you're not the best at aiming or the best at shooting. You should still be able to, find something rewarding in that experience of extracting stuff back out of the world.
You're coming in to a world where
Tabii AI muhabbetinden göstermediler.
Going on. I think the gameplay components there, when they discover you, how they discover other players, and how that becomes noise traps for other players is super interesting. So I think that the toolbox for our designers here to build emergent moments, it's actually really strong.
Ben bu arada hala bazı şeylerin düzeltilebileceğini düşünüyorum oyunda. Daha da iyi olabilir de.
I mean, I understand that some people are upset that it didn't work. So am I. But at the same time, what we have now is an incredible game that I believe works really well, that I think people will have an amazing time with. That's all that we can do as game developers. Try our best to deliver that to the players out there. It's simple. It's not more complicated than that.
Our chief concern is to make a game that is fun at its core and that stays fun and keeps being fun and keeps evolving into something that is even more fun. Because that was the cul-de-sac we ended up with before we rebooted the game, right? It was really fun, but it was the same kind of fun over and over, and that doesn't really cut it.
In the reveal trailer, what we were literally selling to our players is, even though we're saying fictionally, like, there's large machines out there, well, in that video, we are dominating the machines. We're jumping on top of them, smashing them, and inviting players to have fun with that.
Şimdi öyle bir şey yok.
Been flipped around.
Evet.
And I think that's for the better.
Şu anda yemin ediyorum matriark bir peek atıyor sana. Allah'ım.
Really having players fearing the machines is a completely different game. That's a 180 in terms of how we relate to the machines as the players.
Bu arada bence daha güzel. Çünkü sen canavarların daha üstüne olunca bir yerden sonra çok kolaylaşıyor. Keyifli olmamaya başlıyor.
The old version of Arc Raiders was now dead, a dream that the studio was going to have to wake up from. But what could they retain from those early years? What stuff could they bring forward into this new version of Arc Raiders? And what new tricks did they have up their sleeves?
In the next episode of this 3-part series, we're going to tackle the experience of being a raider, how elements like combat, the loot system, audio, and world building evolved after the reset, and crucially why the studio dropped the plan to go free to play.
Evet.
See you then.
Free to play bırakmaları bence en doğru kararlardan birisi oldu.